misericordiae.
Vita dulcedo, et spes nostra salve.
A te clamamus, exules, Filii Eve.
A te suspiramus, gementes et flentes, in hac lacrimarum vale.
Ea ergo advocata nostra, illos tuos misericordes oculos ad nos converte.
Et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilium ostende.
O clemens,
O pia,
o dulcis,
Virgo Maria.
Salve, Regina, Mater misericordiae.
Vita dulcedo, et spes nostra salve.
A te clamamus, exules, Filii Eve.
A te suspiramus, gementes et flentes, in hac lacrimarum vale.
Ea ergo advocata nostra, illos tuos misericordes oculos ad nos converte.
Et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis
Salve, Regina, Mater misericordiae,
Vita dulcedo, et spes nostra salve.
a te clamamus, exules, Filii Eve.
A te suspiramus, gementes et flentes, in hac lacrimarum vale.
Ea ergo advocata nostra, illos tuos misericordes oculos ad nos converte.
Et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilium ostende.
O clemens,
O pia,
O dulcis,
Virgo Maria.
Salve, Regina, Mater misericordiae,
Vita dulcedo, et spes nostra salve.
a te clamamus, exules, Filii Eve.
A te suspiramus, gementes et flentes, in hac lacrimarum vale.
Ea ergo advocata nostra, illos tuos misericordes oculos ad nos converte.
Et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui,
Salve, Regina, Mater misericordiae,
Vita dulcedo, et spes nostra salve.
a te clamamus, exules, Filii Eve.
A te suspiramus, gementes et flentes, in hac lacrimarum vale.
Ea ergo advocata nostra, illos tuos misericordes oculos ad nos converte.
Et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilium ostende.
O clemens,
O pia,
o dulcis,
Virgo Maria.
Salve, Regina, Mater misericordiae,
Vita dulcedo, et spes nostra salve.
a te clamamus, exules, Filii Eve.
A te suspiramus, gementes et flentes, in hac lacrimarum vale.
Ea ergo advocata nostra, illos tuos misericordes oculos ad nos converte.
Et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilium ostende.
O Salve, Regina, Mater misericordiae,
Vita dulcedo, et spes nostra salve.
a te clamamus, exules, Filii Eve.
A te suspiramus, gementes et flentes, in hac lacrimarum vale.
Ea ergo advocata nostra, illos tuos misericordes.
Wait in patience, commit your life to the Lord.
O clemens,
O pia,
o dulcis,
Virgo Maria.
Salve, Regina, Mater misericordiae,
Vita dulcedo, et spes nostra salve.
a te clamamus, exules, Filii Eve.
A te suspiramus, gementes et flentes, in hac lacrimarum vale.
Ea ergo advocata nostra, illos tuos misericordes oculos ad nos converte.
Et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui.
IR New Iberia, 89.7 FM KBIO Natchitoches, and 91.1 FM KOJO Lake Charles. In Texas on 1250 AM KDEI Port Arthur. In Ohio on 88.7 FM WHJM in Anna, 1600 AM WULM Springfield, with translator W277AO, 103.3 FM, Eden Dayton. In Pennsylvania on 88.1 FM, WHHN in Hollidaysburg, Altoona. In Mississippi, also on 88.1 FM, WOLM Diverville, Biloxi. In Wisconsin on 91.3 FM, WRMW Peshtigo. In Florida on 91.9 FM, WMKL Hammocks, Miami. And in Tennessee on 1280 AM, WMCP Columbia, with translator W277DK, 98.9 FM, also in Columbia.
You are listening to Radio Maria, a Christian voice in your home. We now present our program, Jesus, the Promised Messiah of Judaism, with your host, Roy Showman.
Hi, this is Roy Showman, and welcome once again to Jesus, the Promised Messiah of Judaism, the show on Radio Maria that celebrates the Jewish roots of the Catholic faith, or, seen the other way around, a better way around, I actually think, that celebrates the completion, the fulfillment, the full realization of all of the promise of Judaism in the Catholic Church and her sacraments. Well, it's such a treat to have a weekly show because there's time to go into various different topics and different moods and different aspects of the Catholic faith. And here's the scoop that February 18th used to be the feast day of Saint Bernadette of Lourdes. Of course, we just had the feast day of Mary Immaculate of Lourdes, and a few days later used to be the feast day of Saint Bernadette of Lourdes. And it was February 18th was picked for her feast day, which has been moved now. I don't remember where it's been moved to. But February 18th was picked not because it was the day that Bernadette entered heaven, but because it is the day that the Blessed Virgin Mary said to her, "I do not promise to make you happy in this life, but in the next." So a very, very momentous communication from the Queen of Heaven. And so I want to dedicate today's show to Saint Bernadette of Lourdes, and in particular to read some accounts of the apparitions. We've all heard them probably. We've maybe even seen the movie or the YouTube video or something. But I have a book that's basically a compilation of all of the eyewitness accounts of everything that Bernadette said at various times and was written down, and also the testimony of the witnesses who were present at the apparitions, who watched Bernadette, or the doctor that tested Bernadette during one of the apparitions. And anyway, so the people around her. So it's really a collection of first-person witness testimonies, and it's an opportunity to read them and to enter more deeply, again, into this momentous apparition of the Blessed Virgin Mary, probably frankly, one of the two greatest of the last centuries, most momentous, most important, most deeply affecting the Catholic Church. And also, when you actually read the accounts of the witnesses and of Saint Bernadette, you learn things. You learn things that fall through the cracks when you just read about the apparitions. And I think the very first reading that I'm going to do is going to be an illustration of that. But so I will just start at the beginning. I'll actually start on, of course, this is 1858. And I will start on February 11th, 1858, which started out, of course, Bernadette was desperately poor, her family. They lived in, not only did they live in a single room, but the single room they lived in, and I think that Bernadette had a brother and a sister. She might have only had one sibling, but I think she had two siblings, and her parents lived in a very small single room. You can still visit it. I'd say it's probably about 12 feet by 12 feet, maybe 12 by 15, and it was the prison cell. So it was not only very small, it was damp. There was only one small window high in the wall, as I remember, and a little bit of a chimney for the fire for warmth or for cooking. Very, very poor surroundings. I believe it had a dirt floor. If you ever go to Lourdes, you can visit it. It's obviously part of the shrine establishment there. It's called Le Cachot, which means the prison cell, the cell. Anyway, they were very poor, and their heat came from firewood that they found, branches that had broken off the trees that they found in the neighboring woods. So on February 11th, Bernadette went out to gather some of this fallen tree branches, twigs, to warm the homestead. And so that's the setting. And now I will read the words of Bernadette herself about what happened. It's the first encounter with the Blessed Virgin Mary. I'm reading from a book called Saint Bernadette Soubirous by Abbé François Trochu. I believe it's from the turn of the 20th century, from the late 1800s or early 1900s. This is Bernadette speaking. I had hardly begun to take off my stocking when I heard the sound of wind as in a storm. I turned towards the meadow, and I saw that the trees were not moving at all. I had half noticed, but without paying any particular heed, that the branches and brambles were waving beside the grotto. I went on taking my stockings off, and was putting one foot into the water when I heard the same sound in front of me. I looked up and saw a cluster of branches and brambles underneath the topmost opening in the grotto, tossing and swaying to and fro, though nothing else stirred all around. Behind these branches and within the opening, I saw immediately afterwards a girl in white, no bigger than myself, who greeted me with a slight bow of the head. At the same time, she stretched out her arms slightly away from her body, opening her hands, as in pictures of Our Lady, and over her right arm hung a rosary. I was afraid. I stepped back. I wanted to call the two little girls who had accompanied her. I hadn't the courage to do so. I rubbed my eyes again and again. I thought I must be mistaken. Raising my eyes again, I saw the girl smiling at me most graciously and seeming to invite me to come nearer. But I was still afraid. It was not, however, a fear such as I have had at other times, for I would have stayed there forever looking at her, whereas when you are afraid, you run quickly away. Then I thought of saying my prayers. I put my hand in my pocket. I took out the rosary I usually carry on me. I knelt down and I tried to make the sign of the cross, but I could not lift my hand to my forehead. It fell back. The girl, meanwhile, stepped to one side and turned towards me. This time, she was holding the large beads in her hand. She crossed herself as though to pray. My hand was trembling. I tried again to make the sign of the cross, and this time I could. After that, I was not afraid. I said my rosary. The young girl slipped the beads of hers through her fingers, but she was not moving her lips. While I was saying the rosary, I was watching as hard as I could. She was wearing a white dress reaching down to her feet, from which only the toes appeared. The dress was gathered very high at the neck by a hem, from which hung a white cord. A white veil covered her head and came down over her shoulders and arms almost to the bottom of her dress. On each foot I saw a yellow rose. The sash of the dress was blue and hung down below her knees. The chain of the rosary was yellow, the beads white, big, and widely spaced. The girl was alive, very young, and surrounded with light. When I had finished my rosary, she bowed to me, smiling. She retired within the niche, and all of a sudden disappeared. Now I'll go to the narration. When questioned later, Bernadette was to give further details about the young girl who had appeared. A golden cloud preceded her, she said, and then the halo. The latter remained for an instant after the girl had disappeared. She herself was as if penetrated with a soft light, which neither hurt nor dazzled the eyes. Her face was oval in shape and of an incomparable grace. Her eyes were blue, her voice oh so sweet. Her hair scarcely showed through the veil on her forehead, and was clearly visible only at the temples. Yet, in her transports of ecstasy, Bernadette never noticed its exact shade. Her bare feet rested at the threshold of the niche on a carpet of grass and twigs, which the child called moss. Her hands, when she kept them joined, were pressed together along their whole length, palm to palm. Her rosary, with its white beads widely spaced, was not, strictly speaking, a rosary. It had only 5 decades, the same as Bernadette's. Now, in France, a rosary refers to 15 decades and not 5 decades. In English, of course, rosary usually refers to 5 decades. So that's what that little aside was about. The vision and the visionary kept time with each other as they slipped the beads through their fingers. While they were doing so, the girl of the grotto, at her first apparition, did not move her lips except to smile. Yet Bernadette would have occasion later to explain that although during the recitation of the Our Father and the Hail Mary, she seemed to listen without moving her lips, when they came to the Gloria Patri, the Glory Be, she bowed her head and visibly recited it. This last detail, which the little one in her ignorance could not have invented, reveals an accurate and deep theological truth. The Glory Be, which is a hymn of praise to the adorable Trinity, is heaven's canticle. It indeed is the only part of the rosary suitable for her, whose name Bernadette would not learn for another month. The Our Father is the prayer of needy mortals, tempted and sinful, on their journey to the fatherland. And as for the Hail Mary, the angel's greeting, this could be used only by the visionary, as the apparition had no need to greet her own self. If I may add, I doubt that she would flatter herself either by saying, Hail Mary, full of grace, that she would not want to speak glowingly of herself like that. So this is one of those details which only comes about from the witness testimony itself, that the Blessed Virgin Mary did not pray the rosary, so to speak, with the Hail Marys, the Our Fathers, and the Glory Be. She kept time with Bernadette, with the Our Father and the Hail Marys, and she only joined in the Glory Bees, because Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses. That is not something Mary could say, forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation. That's not something the Blessed Virgin Mary could say. She's in no danger. Even when she was alive, she was in no danger of being led into temptation. But now that she's in heaven, the Queen of Heaven, she's certainly in no danger of being led into temptation. But deliver us from evil. So, obviously, the Blessed Virgin Mary had to abstain from the Hail Marys. She had to abstain from the Our Fathers. And the only thing she could chime in on, in her unspeakably beautiful voice, would be the Glory Bees. Okay, so let me continue. And so that was the first apparition of February 11th, 1858. And now I am going to go to the second apparition, which was Sunday, February 14th. And let me set the stage a little bit here. Okay, so first, Bernadette's parents forbade her from returning to the grotto. But two of the respectable ladies from town fled with Bernadette's parents to let her go with these two ladies accompanying her, and the parents relented, and so Bernadette was given permission to go with Madame Hio and Toinette. I don't see Toinette. Oh no. I'll find the other. I'll see the other lady's name in a moment. But in any case, she got permission to go with these ladies. So this is now Sunday, February 14th, and I will start reading from where Bernadette got permission. Bernadette's now with a group of her friends. Satisfied, the group of youngsters ran off to inform the mother that the ban on going to the grotto was lifted. According to Madame Hio, which was one of the respectable ladies, her daughter Marie got the idea of taking along some holy water. What shall we do, Toinette had said, if it is something evil? Toinette being a friend of Bernadette's, or her sister, I don't remember. And so they took a small bottle from the dungeon, which of course is Bernadette's house, which they filled with the holy water stoup in the church, and then they proceeded towards Massabielle, the grotto. On the way, some other schoolgirls joined them, so that by the time they got there were about 20 of them together. And they were walking in two separate groups, anxious as to what was going to happen, but not daring to say so, curious only to discover whether or not Bernadette had told the truth. And in this way they proceeded to the grotto of Massabielle. Bernadette, who was leading, went down the zigzags of the slope at an extraordinary speed, but her companions descended slowly, clutching the bushes. When we reached the grotto at the bottom, Toinette, I'm pretty sure Toinette was Bernadette's sister, continued, she was already on her knees. She made us kneel down and take out our beads. Towards the end of the first decade of the Rosary, Bernadette exclaimed, "Look, a bright light." Then after a moment's silence, she began again in a loud voice, imagining that her companions were favored with the same vision. "Look at her. She has her rosary slipped over her right arm. She's looking at us." The girls questioned one another. Not one of them perceived anything. Bernadette was on her feet again. Bracing her small figure, she took a few paces towards the mysterious being, near enough to touch the bush. "If you come from God," she enjoined, "then stay." And vigorously she sprinkled the rock with holy water, because she had been warned in the meantime that how did she know that it wasn't a demonic manifestation? So she vigorously sprinkled the rock with holy water. Not only did she not go away, but by a smile affirmed that she in fact came from God. Reassured, Bernadette came back and knelt among her companions. Silently, motionlessly, she kept her eyes fixed intently on the point where she appeared. Marie Hillot and her companions had just started another decade of the Rosary, when a stone fell from the top of Massabielle, and before rebounding into the canal, struck the boulder against which Bernadette was leaning. She gave a start. Then, with her hands joined on her beads, her head and shoulders stretched forward, her whole face astonishingly pale but not livid, she remained with her eyes riveted on the niche above the bush. "She's dead," cried several of the schoolgirls, incapable of recognizing in the suspension of the senses the marvel of ecstasy. So we know that Bernadette was in an ecstasy, that her senses were suspended, and she just looked dead. She presumably looked forward with a glazed look in her eyes and was totally motionless. Continuing with the events of that day, the girls ran to get help. They were afraid that Bernadette was dead. They wanted to get her out of the grotto and take her back onto the path, but she was immobile. She was too heavy to move. And they found a young man named Antoine, who was a strapping 28-year-old, and they solicited his help to try to rescue Bernadette or recover the corpse of Bernadette, dependingly. Now we have his own words, Antoine's own words about that moment in his life. Bernadette Subaru, they told me, is at the grotto. We don't know what she sees. We can't drag her away. Come and help us. So Antoine got there. She was on her knees, deathly pale, her eyes wide open and fixed on the niche. She had her hands joined and her beads between her fingers. Tears were streaming from both her eyes. She was smiling, and her face was lovely, lovelier than anything I've ever seen. It made me feel both happy and sad, and all day long my heart was moved at the thought of it. I remained for a time motionless, watching her. The girls were watching her like me. My mother and aunt were also spellbound. In spite of her smile, I was grieved to see her so pale. At length I went up to her, for my mother said to me, "Take hold of her, and we'll bring her home with us." I took her by the right arm. She struggled to stay. Her eyes remained fixed upwards, not a murmur. But after the struggles, a somewhat hurried breathing. I lifted her by one arm, then by the other. My mother took one arm. While lifting her, I wiped her eyes and put my hand in front of them to prevent her seeing. I also tried to make her bend her head, but she raised it again and reopened her eyes with a smile. She obviously was seeing the Blessed Virgin Mary and didn't want to stop seeing her. We had great difficulty in getting her to climb the path, my mother holding one hand and I the other, both of us pulling in front, and my aunt and the girls following behind. She was trying hard to go down again without, however, saying a word. It took great effort to drag her along. Strong as I am, it would have been heavy work had I been alone. All the way up, her face remained deathly pale, and her eyes still wide open and fixed upwards. Her face and eyes remained the same as at the grotto. Tears trickled down continuously. I again put my hand now and then in front of her eyes and dried her tears. She never stopped smiling until she reached the mill. As we went in on the very threshold, she lowered her eyes and head, and the color came back to her face. We took her into the kitchen and made her sit down. The girls had come in with us. When she was seated, I said to her, "What do you see in that hole? Do you see something not very nice?" She said, "Oh no, I see a very lovely lady. She has a rosary on her arm and her hands are joined." While saying this, Bernadette pressed the palms of her hands together. So that's the account of the second apparition on the Sunday, February 14th. Now we are going to move ahead to the third apparition, which is February 18th, which is the one that caused Bernadette's feast day to originally be February 18th, and is the one where the Blessed Virgin Mary spoke to her for the first time. And we will wait with bated breath to see what happened on February 18th, 1858. You're listening to Jesus, the Promised Messiah of Judaism, on Radio Maria with me, your host, Roy Showman. And although I've been reading, this is in fact a live call-in program, and we welcome calls. The number here to call, if you have any questions or comments, is 866-333-6279 or 866-333-MARY, M-A-R-Y. And if you use Skype, the Skype name is on.air.rm for radiomaria.skype. So it's on.air.rm.skype or 866-333-MARY, M-A-R-Y. And with that, I'll be back in a few moments after a short musical interlude. And it's hard to choose which of the beautiful Marian hymns to play. But I think that given this visual description of the Blessed Virgin Mary, I'd better play Toda Pulchra es Maria, or Totally Beautiful is Maria, be back in a couple of minutes. If you wish to call during the musical break, then when I come out of the break, I'll immediately go to the call board and take any calls which have come in before continuing with reading about the third apparition. So here is Tota Pulchra es Maria.
Tota pulchra es Maria, tota pulchra es Maria, et macula originis non est in te.
Originalis
Non est in te, tu gloria Jerusalem,
tu letitia Israel,
tu honorificentia populi nostri, tu advocata peccatorum, O Maria, Virgo prudentissima,
Mater clementissima,
ora pro nobis,
intercede pro nobis, ad Dominum Iesum Christum.
That was Tota Pulchra es Maria. Totally, completely beautiful, perfectly beautiful is the Blessed Virgin Mary, is Maria. Okay, well, I don't see any calls that have come in, so I will go back to reading. However, if you wish to call, you're still welcome to. The number is 866-333-6279 or 866-333-MARY. And if you call in, then I will, if I notice it, I hope I do, I will interrupt the reading, take your call and any question or comment you might have. You're listening to Jesus, the Promised Messiah of Judaism on Radio Maria. Now, I slipped up a little bit. It was the third apparition, the one I'm about to read on February 18th, where Bernadette had been forbidden to go to the grotto, but two respectable women talked her parents into letting her. I had thought it was the second apparition, but it's the third. So that's where we're going to pick up. Those two women's names were Madame Millet or Mademoiselle Perret. And so we're on now Thursday, February 18th. And on that day, these two respectable women, shortly after 5:30 a.m., knocked on the Subaru's door. Bernadette answered from within. She was not yet up. She dressed hurriedly and appeared in the doorway. I caught sight of her then for the first time, states Antoinette Perret. The bell was ringing for the first Mass. They went straight to the church, and after hearing Mass, they went out without a word into the fog. Madame Millet had a blessed candle hidden under her long coat. Mademoiselle Perret carried in her pocket a sheet of white paper, a pen, and an ink pot to enable Bernadette to write down anything that the beautiful lady said. Nobody has claimed that it's the Blessed Virgin Mary yet. I will say that they make the comment that they went straight to the grotto after hearing Mass, because in those days, ordinary people could not receive communion very frequently. And so they would not have been receiving communion. They would have just been hearing Mass. But it was considered a great grace, like a spiritual communion, to hear Mass. Joan of Arc required all her soldiers before battle to hear Mass, and they'd all be gathered in the field, and the priest would celebrate Mass, and the soldiers would all be on their knees hearing Mass. They weren't receiving communion. They were just hearing Mass and receiving the graces of being present at the Mass. We're very spoiled in our day at being able to receive communion daily and actually twice a day. So, but it hasn't always been the case. Now back to Bernadette. Okay, where are we here? Okay. Now we're on the words of one of those two women, Mademoiselle Perret. Then we took the Massabiella road. At the beginning of the path that led to the grotto, Bernadette took the lead, and running along this slope, she disappeared like a flash of lightning. As for ourselves, we had to squat on our heels and got down there only with the greatest difficulty. Back to the narration. All three had taken out their rosary beads. Bernadette, with her eyes turned towards the bush, had fallen into a profound recollection. Suddenly she exclaimed, "There she is!" "Be quiet," Madame Billet boldly ordered her, still incredulous and no doubt vexed at perceiving nothing. "Let's say the rosary." That's chutzpah, telling Bernadette to keep quiet when she explodes in excitement at seeing the Blessed Virgin Mary before her eyes. No, keep quiet, child. It's time for us to quietly say the rosary. Anyway, Bernadette agreed. There was no apparent change in her. She was gazing at the apparition, and this time she did not seem to leave the earth in spirit. Externally, there was nothing in her features or in her eyes that indicated ecstasy. That morning she was to be the intermediary between two worlds, and so, for the intercommunication of one to the other, she was to remain free in her movements. She would act with perfect ease and lucidity, the opposite to hallucination with its fixed stare and automaton's actions. So again, a very interesting little detail which one is not likely to pick up in a casual account, that at one time, in one apparition, Bernadette was in such a deep trance, so to speak, that her friends thought she was dead. And then in the next apparition, Bernadette was completely normal. Her everything about her eyes and her face and everything else was not at all, in a kind of frozen state. As the rosary was not being recited in common, Antoinette Perret, her lips moving rapidly, was the first to finish the 5 decades. "Go and ask the lady what she wants," she told the child, who had not taken her eyes off the niche above the wild rose bush. Holding the inkpot, pen, and paper handed to her by Mademoiselle Perret, Bernadette rose, stepped forward, and almost grazed the drooping branches of the bush. But suddenly she swerved and made toward the grotto. The two women saw her stand on tiptoe, holding out pen and paper. Therefore the lady must have graciously drawn nearer the child in order to be within easier reach. Bernadette stated afterwards that she had spoken to the apparition, but the women with her did not hear her voice. The reason was that, even in an incomplete ecstasy such as this one, Bernadette's voice did not reach the outside. At times, merely the movement of her lips was seen. Yet, feeling herself to be speaking, she imagined she was heard by those present. "I was speaking very loud, just as now," she explained many times to whoever questioned her about her conversations with the Lady of Massabielle. So again, I guess there are two things to point out here. One is that not only is the physical manifestation, so to speak, of different visionaries who have different visions different. In other words, not only do the manifestations vary between visionaries, but they vary for the same visionary at different times in different visions. Now, if you stop to think about it, it makes perfect sense, because what we have here is a kind of intersection between the spiritual world and the physical world. And I can easily imagine that such an intersection is a very delicate affair, and depending on the particular circumstances and the particular agenda, it is going to be different at different times. And so it's very interesting. Bernadette thought she was speaking out loud. She heard herself as though she was speaking in a loud voice. The other people around didn't hear her at all. We can only imagine why, for God's purposes or for the Blessed Virgin Mary's purposes, it was more appropriate that they should not hear Bernadette's voice, but we should respect the fact that these things matter. And needless to say, if you are a lead-footed, dull-witted police inspector trying to poke holes in Bernadette's stories, you're never going to have the agility to take all the twists and turns of the true situation. So we should be careful, I guess, is the bottom line, when we are confronted with other people's supernatural experiences. We should be careful about oversimplifying, saying, well, this person isn't telling the truth because when this other person saw Mary, she looked like this, or, her voice sounded like this, or she spoke out loud, or she didn't speak out loud, or whatever. We can't just take a cut and paste approach to these supernatural experiences. Okay. So we'll go back to Bernadette's words. So she thought she was speaking loudly, but no one heard her. While I was moving forward, the lady drew back as though retiring to her own private chamber, so that while placing my articles on a rock, I saw her in front of me. She made me a sign that I was to stay, and that the others were to retire. Madame, I then said, would you be so kind as to write down your name? For the first time I heard her voice. To Abbé Pen, the curate in Lourdes, the priest, who asked her soon afterwards whether she heard the apparition's voice distinctly, Bernadette made this touching reply, "Oh yes, most clearly, only it seems to me the sound of her voice reaches me here," and while saying this, she placed her hand on her breast. The apparition did therefore speak, and in the Lourdes dialect. Her reply was negative. In other words, she said no, she would not write down her name. At once Bernadette went and communicated it to her two companions. Then, standing in front of the boulder, Bernadette was listening again, and for the second time, the very sweet voice spoke. "Will you do me the favor of coming here for a fortnight?" "After asking permission from my parents, I will come," agreed Bernadette. Then the apparition added, "I do not promise to make you happy in this world, but in the next." When she had said that, she rose toward the roof and disappeared. In the simplest possible manner, Bernadette came back and knelt down between her companions, and all three prayed for some moments. Before getting up again, the young visionary leant towards Madame Perret and whispered, "It looked at you smiling." But Mademoiselle Perret admitted, "I did not at the time believe in the reality of these visions. On the way back to Lourdes, just as we had done while going back to the grotto, we kept saying to Bernadette, 'Beware, if you're telling lies, God will punish you.'" So Mademoiselle Perret, who was there at the apparition, still did not believe in the reality of the apparition, thought Bernadette was lying. Okay, so there we have the third apparition, at which Our Lady said to Bernadette, "I do not promise to make you happy in this life, but in the next." Now, the hour is fleeing from me, so I can't read all the apparitions. So it's going to be hard to figure out where to go here. But I'll go to Tuesday, February 23rd. And or maybe I'll go, bear with me a moment. Just a moment here. Because I shouldn't leave dead air on. Okay, I'll read the next apparition. Now, the last apparition that I just read, the Blessed Virgin Mary asked Bernadette to come every day for a fortnight. That's 2 weeks. Bernadette said yes, as long as my parents give me permission. And so this is now the first apparition of that fortnight, and it is February 19th. Bernadette was faithful to her appointment. She went most punctually to the grotto for a fortnight. She always obtained the same favors there, except on 2 days when the apparition did not appear. But from now on, she was accompanied by an ever-increasing crowd. When she had the happiness of seeing the vision, she forgot everything. She no longer noticed what was taking place around her. She was entirely absorbed. I'm reading, by the way, the account of, at the time, written by Bishop Lawrence in the first inquiry. So this is basically an eyewitness, or at least a contemporary, who was got the information from Bernadette herself. Bernadette usually saw the vision in the opening mentioned above, sometimes in a winding passage of the grotto further within, always in white with a blue sash and an enchantingly beautiful face. Now, on February 19th, as soon as the apparition appeared, reported another eyewitness, her smile became lovely, and this is Bernadette's smile, became lovely, and Bernadette's face changed. She gave a greeting with her hand and head. It was a delight to see her. It was as if she had done nothing else all her life but learn how to bow. Aunt Bernard also noticed Bernadette's bows and smiles, and from time to time a very slight movement of the lips. To see her face like that brought tears to your eyes. There were, indeed, some touching moments during this fourth apparition. Around Bernadette, who, one eyewitness said, appeared to belong no more to this world, or rather seemed ready to leave this world, all the women had risen to their feet. "How lovely she is like that," cried one of them. "She's dying," exclaimed another. "Ah, poor little thing. What a wretch I am," sobbed Aunt Bernard, while Louise Subaru uttered a fervent entreaty to the Lord of life and death, that's Bernadette's mother. "My God, I implore you, don't take my child away from me." At the end of about a half hour, the vision ceased, and Bernadette sank into her mother's arms. Not that this half hour of bliss had exhausted her. She never felt any weariness after the apparitions, but the impression on her eyes as she emerged from the vision was like that which is felt when one passes from bright sunshine into a dark place. And so, during this moment of tremendous transition, she would feel blinded and would grope for someone to support her. On the way back home, Bernadette revealed how, at a certain moment, the apparition seemed different from before. Suddenly, loud yells belched forth from the cave and had rent the sacred silence of Massabielle. They challenged, crossed, collided with one another like the clamor of a brawling crowd, Bernadette said. One voice, more furious than the rest, dominated them all and roared out, "Get out of here! Get out of here!" Bernadette guessed rightly that the threatening curse was by no means addressed merely to her humble self, but was an attack directed behind her to the vision of light standing above the bush. The vision merely glanced in the direction of the rushing stream. This single look, one of sovereign authority, reduced the invisible mob to silence. The enemy of all good would not drive her from the grotto where she gave her audiences. He is in a rage, so much the better, the saintly curé of Ars used to say of the devil. He lets me know himself when big sinners are coming. At Massabielle, the future was to prove that the spirit of evil in this burst of fury had admitted his defeat. He was not to extinguish the great radiance that would issue from this dark, peaceful nook where so many sinners would renounce sin. So, there was a satanic manifestation during this apparition, and Bernadette heard the voices of demons, perhaps the voices of Satan himself, growling and clamoring and threatening and imperiously saying, "Get out of here, get out of here." Maybe to Bernadette, maybe to the Blessed Virgin Mary, maybe to both. And all the Blessed Virgin Mary had to do was give him a stern look. What was the words here? The vision merely glanced in the direction. This single look, one of sovereign authority, reduced the invisible mob, that's the demonic mob, to silence. She just had to give a look of authority, and it conquered all of the demons of hell, conquered Satan himself. And this was true in 1858, and it's true today. If you ever hear the documentary on the possession of Annalisa Michel, I believe it was in Belgium, the culmination of the exorcism, the exorcism was recorded. You can actually hear the recording. And the culmination of the exorcism, the four priests, I think there were four priests performing the exorcism, sang the Magnificat. I think it was the Magnificat. And the Blessed Virgin Mary approached, and the priest didn't see her approach, but the demons started screaming and being tortured and saying, "No, no, she's coming, she's coming, she's coming." And simply her approach was enough to get them out of there. So we know she's the Queen of Heaven. We know she's our ultimate intercessor. And we certainly may not pray to her, but we certainly invoke her prayers and beg her for her prayers to pray to God on our behalf. And also, if I may say so, if it's allowed to say so, to exercise the authority she has as Queen of Heaven in our defense. And therefore, with that little introduction, and also because I'm getting hoarse, let me play one other short hymn while I catch my breath, honoring her as the Queen of Heaven, Salve Regina. You're listening to Jesus, the Promised Messiah of Judaism on Radio Maria with me, your host, Roy Schoeman. I'll be back in a moment. If you wish to call in during the short musical break, the number here is 866-333-6279 or 866-333-MARY, M-A-R-Y. And if any calls come in, I'll immediately turn to the call board and take them before continuing with reading the account of the apparitions of the Blessed Virgin Mary to Saint Bernadette at Lourdes. Now for the Salve Regina, Hail, Queen of Heaven.
Salve Regina, Mater misericordiae,
Vita dulcedo, et spes nostra salve.
a te clamamus, exules, Filii
Gementes et flentes in hac lacrimarum vale.
Ea ergo advocata nostra, illos tuos misericordes oculos ad nos converte.
Well, I'm cutting that hymn a little bit short because I hear we have a caller. If you could put the caller on, and if he or she could give his or her name and where he or her is calling from. Hello?
Hi, my name is Tiffany. I'm calling from the Chicago area.
Oh, great. Did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, so I apologize if this is a silly question because you might have explained it already and things just tend to go right over my head. But you mentioned earlier that communion wasn't taken so often as it is now. Why was that?
I can't really answer that in a simple way. Maybe I can't answer it at all. I know that Saint Therese of Lisieux was ecstatic because it was when she was an adolescent, I don't know when, about 13, 14, 15, that for the first time, lay people were permitted to receive communion every Sunday, I believe it was. There was a problem, a heresy, you could say. I think it technically is called a heresy, called Jansenism in France, that was just ending around the time of Saint Therese of Lisieux, the end of the 19th century. I don't know when Jansen first emerged, and therefore the heresy. Maybe it was about 150 years earlier or something like that. And it was a teaching that it was a very harsh teaching that basically, unless you were a nun or a priest or a monk, you had almost no chance of making it to heaven. You were almost certainly damned. And that ordinary lay people, it wasn't appropriate for them to receive communion, I believe, more than once a year. I could have that slight detail wrong. But you can look up Jansenism, Jansenism, for the history of that heresy. But it was very oppressive. It was very oppressive. It made everyone feel, scared of God. And it also actually had a bad effect on the clergy because it made the clergy feel very much like it's us versus them, if you know what I mean. Sort of like we're in one category and they're in another category, which also wasn't very healthy. Does that answer your question?
Oh, yes, it does. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Okay, sure. Back to the next apparition, which may be the no, I think I better skip forward. Is that right? No, I'll just read this one. It's probably going to be the last one. So we're now on the following Sunday, and by now everyone in the crowd believed that the apparitions were real, and that this Subaru girl certainly saw somebody. And there were some policemen because the authorities were already involved and not approving of things. And there was a doctor who was there kind of surreptitiously. And as soon as Bernadette knelt down and took her rosary out of her pocket and began to pray on her rosary beads, her face underwent a transformation noticed by everyone. And the doctor was not very nice because I'll just read the account then. This is the account of the doctors. I myself was following most attentively all of Bernadette's movements in order to study her from more than one aspect, for I wanted to check at that moment the circulation of her blood and her breathing. I took one of her arms and put my fingers on the radial artery. The pulse was calm and regular, the breathing easy. Nothing in the young girl indicated any undue nervous excitement that had reacted in any peculiar way upon the whole system. After I had let go of her arm, Bernadette advanced a short distance towards the top of the grotto. Soon I saw her face, which up to now had expressed the most perfect happiness, grow sad. 2 tears fell from her eyes and rolled down her cheeks. Then the doctor asked her later what was the reason for such tears after such happy smiles, and Bernadette's answer was, "The lady took her eyes off me for a moment and gazed into the distance over my head. Then looking at me again, as I had asked her what was making her sad, she said to me, 'Pray to God for sinners.' I was quickly reassured by the expression of kindness and serenity I saw once more on her face, and she straightway disappeared." So her message to Bernadette was, "Pray to God for sinners." And that's a very fitting message to end today's show with. We sometimes forget there are lots of messages from Our Lady, and Our Lady came to Bernadette at Lourdes to provide the spring for the healing of people, to bring about many conversions, but also to encourage, as she said to Bernadette at one point, penance, 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 and praying for the conversion of sinners. And now that we're in the period of Septuagesima leading up to Lent, and then, of course, Holy Week, it is a good time to remember her message, penance, 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 and pray very much to God for sinners. And with that, my time is up. I'm going to leave you. You've been listening to Jesus, the Promised Messiah of Judaism on Radio Maria with me, your host, Roy Schoeman. And I will go out with another very beautiful hymn to the Blessed Virgin Mary. There's certainly plenty of them. Ave Regina Celorum. Hail, Queen of Heaven.
Ave Regina Celorum. Ave Domina Angelorum. Salve Radix, salve porta, ex qua mundo lux est orta. Gaude Virgo gloriosa, super omnes speciosa. Valle, o valde decora, et pro nobis Christum exora.
Okay, well, thanks for watching, and I'll be back. I enjoyed that. I'm not even sure why, but it's just so beautiful, and it's the world we live in. It's the world we live in, and it's not an imaginary world. Atheism is the imaginary world. Materialism is the imaginary world. The intersection between life on earth and heaven and God and the saints, that's the real world, is the intersection, is the fact that life on earth is simply, I don't know how to put it, but it's just a manifestation of life in heaven. You know, it's a prelude to life in heaven, and it is directed by heaven, and the meaning of everything is the meaning that it has in the eyes of heaven. And with that, I'll stop preaching and say goodbye. I'll go back to the opening screen and the opening hymn. So let's see how I do this. Okay, the opening hymn might just start violently. I don't know.
Salve Regina, Mater misericordiae,
Vita dulcedo, et spes nostra salve.
a te clamamus, exules, Filii Eve.
A te suspiramus, gementes et flentes, in hac lacrimarum vale.
Ea ergo advocata nostra, illos tuos misericordes oculos ad nos converte.
Et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilium ostende.
O clemens,
O pia,
o dulcis,
Virgo Maria.
Salve Regina, Mater misericordiae,
Vita dulcedo, et spes nostra salve.
a te clamamus, exules, Filii Eve.
A te suspiramus, gementes et flentes, in hac lacrimarum vale.
Ea ergo advocata nostra, illos tuos misericordes oculos ad nos converte.
Et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui,
clemens, dulcis,
Virgo Maria.
salve, Regina, Mater misericordiae,
Vita dulcedo, et spes nostra salve.
a te clamamus, exules, Filii Eve.
A te suspiramus, gementes et flentes, in hac lacrimarum vale.
Ea ergo advocata nostra, illos tuos misericordes oculos ad nos converte.
Et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilium ostende.
O clemens, dulcis,
Virgo Maria.
salve, Regina, Mater misericordiae,
Vita dulcedo, et spes nostra salve.
a te clamamus, exules, Filii Eve.
A te suspiramus, gementes et flentes, in hac lacrimarum vale.
Ea ergo advocata nostra, illos tuos misericordes oculos nos converte.
Et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilium ostende.
O clemens,
O pia,
o dulcis,
Virgo Maria.
salve Regina, Mater misericordiae,
Vita dulcedo, et spes nostra salve.
a te clamamus, exules, Filii Eve.
A te suspiramus, gementes et flentes, in hac lacrimarum vale.
Ea ergo advocata nostra, illos tuos misericordes oculos ad nos converte.
Et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilium ostende.
O clemens,
O pia,
o dulcis,
Virgo Maria.
salve Regina, Mater misericordiae,
Vita dulcedo, et spes nostra salve.
a te clamamus, exules, Filii Eve.
A te suspiramus, gementes et
Venia ergo advocata nostra, illos tuos misericordes oculos ad nos converte.
Et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilium ostende.
O clemens,
O pia,
o dulcis,
Virgo Maria.
salve Regina, Mater misericordiae,
Vita dulcedo, et spes nostra salve.
a te